Hey everyone, it's officially February. I'm Mike Curtis here with Preston, the Pirate James, founder of Traders Edge Network, and we're here to help you kick off a new month, a new week, cutting through all the noise and chaos out there as traders and investors. So Preston, crazy busy week on the earnings calendar. Lots to talk about today, so say hello. We'll get this one rolling.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Mike. Yeah, fresh new week. We've got a full week of trading planned, and the first official week of some of these top stocks having 3 expirations a week. And I've just been this morning peering through and looking at what those premiums are that expire today, and then the ones that expire on Wednesday. And it's kind of a new world, but it's exciting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we in some of the opportunities, the extra income potential that having those extra option expirations, how that opens things up. I know you'll be sharing a lot of that with our WoW insiders, a lot more in depth. But looking at this week, the first Friday of every month, we've got our unemployment numbers. The jobs report comes out, non-farm payrolls. So we've got that on Friday. Preston, I know you've got a lot of companies you want to talk about on the earnings front, but before we get into that, let's start. I mean, if we could just pull up a chart of the S&P 500 last week was pretty fascinating price action to show what happened Thursday, this big sell-off day. I mean, at one point, the S&P was down over 100 points. It opened somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,978, something like that. The low was 6,870, at least this number I'm seeing on my screen here. So looking at a day where the S&P was down about 1.5%. And then what was fascinating on Thursday was all the buyers came back in. And if you've studied, candlestick patterns, this is what they call a hammer candle, right? There's the body of the candle where the open and close were pretty similar, but there's this huge wick on the bottom of that candle. And what that shows you is throughout the day, there was some really intense selling. When the wick of that candle is really long like that, down 100 plus points. And then the bulls just came in. They couldn't help it. They wanted to come back in and buy this thing. And it shows this battle, right? It shows a battle where the bears were driving the price action down, lots of selling pressure. But then the bulls kind of win the day. They came in and they pushed the price right back up to where I think it finished down like 10. The S&P 500 down like 10 on the day. And then Friday, we saw something really similar. So pretty unique to see that type of price action back to back. It wasn't as extreme on Friday, but still the bears came in. They were driving some of that price action lower. And then the bulls came in. They couldn't help it at some of these levels, just started looking for these buying opportunities and drove the price back up to near where it opened the trading day. Now, there was a gap down on Friday, so it was still some red numbers out there. But overall, when you see that type of price action, what it speaks is usually the bulls are coming in and they just have this buying appetite at some of these levels. Now, today's price action, a little bit different, but again, a gap down. And we saw the futures. I peeked at them. I mentioned this before we went live, Preston, but last night, I checked the phone and the futures were down. At one point, the S&P, the futures were down like 70 or 80 points. We had this little gap down to start the day, but now as I'm looking at it, the S&P's up almost 50. So a gap down, we covered that ground, pushed higher. So what it looks like is we're getting a higher swing low on the S&P 500. And if we go push through, get some momentum to some new highs, we're watching this one close to see if this little stalled uptrend is what I've been calling it, get some new life and energy as we start this new month. So what are you seeing on that front, Preston?
Interesting. I just note that Thursday and on that big hammer day that you talked about, looks like the market came down and kissed that 50-day moving average. I mean, it just came down and touched it,
Right.
and zoomed right off of there. And then as far as this morning, yours truly happened to be in the dental chair, and they understand that the it had the filling done, so I had the gas, and they understand that there's a big guy setting for the gas, so that I was their first patient, so all the stuff that happened, I'm still coming out of the numbness and hoping my jaw's not looking weird on camera. But also, Mike, just to have you color the January
Mm,
action, which is all done now,
right.
it looks like we had a net positive S&P 500, and how that has bode well for multiple 4 or 5 decades. Now
Yep.
that we go on to have a positive year,
Yep. Yeah, it's something to the tune of
not
about
every time, but most of the
84%.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, about 84% of the time, if January finishes on the S&P 500 positive, right? So where we opened to start the month of January to where we closed to end the month of January. If we're in the green, um, we that qualifies as the January barometer. So on the S&P, December 31st, we closed around 68.45. And then Friday, we closed at about 69.39, right around, a 55-point gain. So not too substantial, not a huge move, but it still qualifies as check. We had a positive January. The S&P was higher. So like I said, typically that lends itself to being a decent performing year. Again, there's so many variables that can come in and change that, and but it is a positive sign that if there's that more of that buying appetite to start the year, that typically, as the year plays out, we tend to see the market perform overall for the calendar year.
I think that's noteworthy. That's a big deal. That's a big January.
Yeah, and we've talked about this other little side note on the S&P, and we can start talking maybe about some of the earnings, anything else you've got your eye on, but these whole round numbers, right? The S&P, we're about 10 points away as I'm recording this from that 7,000 level. And we saw that on Wednesday of last week. It came up and it touched, like, I think it got 2 points above 7,000, and that's when we saw just some of that selling pressure come in. So you can see, as the NASDAQ hit these whole round numbers, as it hit 15,000, as it hit 20,000, it tends to stall. It's kind of this paradigm shift, right? So we're watching that closely as well to see, as the S&P is really approaching that whole round number of 7,000 again, are we going to see it struggle, pause, stall a little bit, or can we punch through that and start surging to some new highs with some of that bullish energy? We'd love to see that. So anything else on that front, P,
Never a
before
dull
we?
moment, Mike. That's for sure.
Yeah, and as part of that rattle, I said the futures are down. Just I think it's good to mention the Bitcoin had a big sell off over the weekend. If you've watched the price of gold or silver at all over the last week, it's just been insane. Gold popped above 5,600
Yeah.
an ounce, and then just over the last couple of days dropped down to about 4,500 an ounce was the low. So over $1,000 per ounce swing in the gold market.
Yeah.
And it was necessary. Preston, we were talking about, it's just so hot. It'd been covering so much ground. We're like, it just, if you see, I don't know what moving average that is on the screen right there, but how stretched it was from just kind of the averages, the moving averages. It got hot, and silver even more extreme. So it wasn't surprising to see a little bit of that air come out of the balloon, but the way it did it was so extreme. So extreme price action up, not unusual to see some sort of extreme price action down. So when gold, silver, Bitcoin is all seeing kind of the sell off, I think that really rattled, the Asian markets. I know had a rough start, and then we saw the futures down, but the bulls have come in and just pushed us right back into positive territory. So just interesting to note that as well.
Yeah. And at one point over the weekend, this is a little inside baseball, but I sent Mike a picture of this silver bracelet, and it just dawned on me that at one point it had doubled in about and then halved itself in about 48 hours. I didn't really feel anything on my wrist, but it's crazy.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, keep an eye on that S&P. We'll see how it reacts at the 7,000 level. But Preston, I know we've got I think it's the busiest week of earnings, just number of companies reporting
Yeah.
of the earnings season. So a couple Mag 7 stocks. Share with everyone here what you've got your eyes on that earnings
Yeah,
front.
well, Palantir's comes out after the close today. That one's had a pretty good pullback. Be
Mm-hmm.
interesting to see what happens. AMD, Advanced Micro Devices, Tuesday after the close. SMCI, that's been one that we talked about here and there, but not so much lately. They're having a kind of a good day today, but they've really sold off. That'll be really interesting. All these have weekly options. CME,
Mm.
the basically the OG of prediction markets before anything else, before that was even a term. Of course, that's the Chicago Mercantile Group that owns weekly options and owns the VIX and basically owns all the betting that comes in. And it seems like not every day, but I mean, when it seems like it's a counter punch. I mean, if the market's selling off, CME usually goes the other way. Anyway, they announced earnings this week and super compelling company. And then Google comes in after the close Wednesday. And also a company we don't talk about too much, but one that's just kind of never in the headlines that much, but Qualcomm,
Mm.
QCOM, Wednesday after the close. Also, one to mention, Mike, that's kind of a backbone bulwark behind the whole AI build out is Bloom Energy, BE, and they announced this week, Thursday after the close. Um, I have my eye on all those before maybe the other ones.
Yeah, and I think you probably mentioned this and I didn't hear, but Amazon is Thursday after the close.
Oh, I didn't mention that. Yeah.
So yeah, another big one. I mean, again, lots of between, Pepsi, Pfizer, Philip Morris this week. There's a lot
Eli
of
Lilly.
different,
Yeah.
yeah, just a lot of earnings this week that I think, a lot of eyeballs always on earnings, of course. But as you start getting these different companies reporting, it can be a lot of eyeballs on it, trying to analyze, okay, how healthy is the consumer spending market? How is the AI trade still there? Is there a lot of buzz, investment, profitability going? So I think there's definitely a lot to watch this week on all that front.
And Mike, we talked about before we pushed record too the layoffs in Amazon,
Mm.
the layoffs in UPS. Um, Mike and I happen to drive a Model S, and Mike happens to drive a Model X Tesla, and we found out news that both of those will be discontinued. And then the other paragraph that started basically said um, they're going to be building the Optimus robot in place of those cars, and
Right.
just kind of the whirlwind of change. And obviously the layoffs in Amazon. It was I'm not sure. I mean, I didn't put the green eye shade on and look at every department, but the gist of what I saw was basically going forward, more mechanization, more robots, more
Right.
non-humans. That ultimately it's going to drive the earnings per share. Companies need to have that bottom line first and foremost, and so just going forward, less humans are needed
Mm-hmm.
and they can do a better job. They can work 24/7. They don't need a break, all that stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
Mike, we're just seeing more and more just, and it just happens like a paper cut. You just don't notice it that much, but you
Yeah.
kind of really saw from these news items from these two companies the future unfolding just a little bit more by a little bit more.
Yep, for sure.
With
And I can't
one
remember,
of
it
it
was,
being our cars aren't going to be made anymore.
but yeah, I think it was last week. I can't remember which CEO it was, but they said, hey, thanks to AI, we can have one person replace kind of the workload of a team, whether that's 5 people, 8 people, whatever. But they said the AI is, if there's someone that knows how to really utilize it. And it was more in that tech world, so probably programming and cleaning up code and debugging thing. It's become so powerful that you can have one person really replace what used to be a whole team, and that's pretty powerful. And I think it was even Powell in the last Fed meeting last week was saying, yeah, they were asking about the jobs market and the labor market, and he said, well, anytime you get new technology like this, that's just really cutting edge, game changing type technology, you're going to see jobs, it's going to replace jobs, and then you're going to see jobs get created. And there's a lot of truth to that, right? There's,
Mhm.
as you think of just the humanoid robots that Tesla's bringing online, how those are being made, the people behind that's going to need to fix the machines when they go down, the programming behind it. There's so many, even though that might replace, right, those humanoids might replace a few jobs, there's going to be new jobs being created behind that technology as well. So yeah, that's impacting some of the labor market, which, like you just mentioned, with UPS, Amazon, some of these layoffs. So, and you also mentioned, Preston, they're seeking that healthy bottom line. So if you can have someone replace 2 or 3 jobs and you save some salary, of course, companies are going to approach that. And then as that technology settles and shuffles, you're going to see new opportunities arise in that same vein, I think. So,
Yeah, they got to answer to shareholders, and part of me thinks too, with the AI center build outs, and is there a swing back to highly skilled blue collar
mhm,
work
right.
versus, I think some of this white collar work, there was that got bloated, right? I mean, just instant $200,000 or $300,000 a year jobs, and people on their segways, and not paying for fancy lunches that included duck, like gourmet meals with duck. And anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting the times we live in and how it unfolds.
Yeah, for sure. Well, awesome, Preston. We got a fun story that we wanted to share in closing, like we like to do, from Daniel. But anything else, anything you got your eye on, or anything you want to tie in before we wrap this one up today?
No, I think we covered some good ground, Mike.
Awesome. I agree. So Daniel, he said, I'm excited to start the money press and covered call trades on the SLV and HAL positions. He said, I made the goal in 1 to 2 weeks. I started paper trading first, and then small steps are paying off. I'm learning more each and every day. So I love that approach, Daniel. Our WoW insiders can see exactly what Preston's trading. He shares the specifics of what he's doing, and then you can just take that as educational, learn from it, or you can baby steps start trading along with that. It's just a great way to start learning the mechanics of the trade, how we manage the positions. But Daniel goes on, he says, thank you for opening my eyes to new and different approaches. I can't wait to see where this journey takes me. Congratulations to all, and keep on learning and trading. So awesome, Daniel. Love that you're diving in. Setting small goals is really important. What we've built out for our WoW insiders over this last year is we have these little milestones that we want them to just feel the progress, because it's easy, I think, as humans, we get to this level, maybe check off a little goal, and our brains just quickly look out to the next goal. We don't take time to slow down and appreciate the ground we've covered. So we have these little milestones. One is just passing a little, a qualification. We say, hey, answer some of these questions. How are you starting to understand options, some of the basics? And then when they place that first live trade, we have another little milestone. And then as they make $250 in profit, another little milestone. It's like, hey, slow down. You're understanding an option strategy. You're building trades. You actually are seeing profits now. That's real, tangible gains. Slow down and appreciate it. Then we have a $2,000 milestone.
And the
This two,
250 is food related. I got to add
yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah.
just to go treat yourself to a fun dinner.
Absolutely. Yeah, we want people to make it real. So pull out a little cash, go have a fun dinner, something that you'll remember, make it tangible, because a number just moving on the screen, I fall victim to this, Preston, I'm sure you do too.
Yeah.
But I see that number on the screen just kind of moving, and sometimes it's tough to stop and appreciate how much ground you've covered, right? And how much money you've actually made. And, you get used to where that number is in your brokerage account. And you're just, at least my brain, where's the next level? Where's the next threshold? Where am I going next? Where am I going next? You're like, whoa, I had an amazing January, right? That's a lot of ground that most people would freak to get that an entire year, right? So it's great to slow down and try to celebrate those little wins. So Daniel, big shout out to you, starting small, having a little goal, paper trade, and then moving in where we want to see you pop up in that $250 club, that $2,000 profit club real soon. So thanks for sharing that, Daniel. Great stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's just like in Shawshank Redemption, the two things that got him out, got his freedom was pressure and time. And I like to think that we sell time and we just apply a little pressure by using those options. But yeah, at some point, Mike, the tunnel's going to stop and you're out. You gotta go. You'll be
Absolutely.
free.
Good stuff. Well, thanks as always, Preston. We'll be back next week. Hopefully, you're kicking off the month great. I'm excited to tackle a new week of trading and investing. Hopefully, some of the insights we shared today can help you start on this month on a good footing, and you can hit the ground running. So, thanks always, Preston, for your insight, and we'll catch everyone next week.
Thanks to you, Mike. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Take care.